Hello everyone, this is Dr. Fox, and let's talk about secondary lymphatic organs and tissues. In this video, we'll describe the locations and functions of lymph nodes, lymphatic nodules, and the spleen. We'll also describe the location, constituents, and functions of Waldeyer's ring. We'll describe tonsillitis, lymphadenopathy, as well as metastasis. So let's begin with the lymph nodes. Lymph nodes as secondary organs of the lymphatic system are encapsulated and they have architectural structure within, therefore they are considered organs. Generally, they are roughly bean-shaped organs and occur in clusters throughout the pathways that lymphatic vessels take from their capillaries all the way back to the ducts. And they're typically named for the regions where they exist. Now, lymph nodes have outer cortex sinuses. These outer cortex sinuses are hosts to B cells in clusters called lymphatic nodules. There are also inner cortex sinuses, and inner cortex sinuses, it would be like this area there, host both T cells and dendritic cells. Dendritic cells in this context are serving as antigen-presenting cells. And then there are medullary sinuses. Medullary sinuses contain B cells and plasma cells derived from those B cells, as well as macrophages. So we have afferent vessels, which carry the lymph into the lymph node, and efferent vessels, which carry lymph out of the lymph node. And so lymph nodes are serving as kind of like filters for lymph, whereby antigen-presenting cells and any antigens of pathogens can encounter lymphocytes and antigen-presenting cells, and then those lymphocytes can be activated, and we can have, specific immune responses against them. Very similar to lymph nodes are lymphatic nodules. Lymphatic nodules are acapsular, therefore they are not an organ, and they lack the distinct structural architecture of the lymph node. Now, lymphatic nodules typically occur in what's known as mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT for short. And there are all different kinds of MALT, and we'll see some of these. So MALT typically is in very close association with the lamina propria of mucous membranes. So that's the portion of the epithelial membrane which is anchoring the epithelial cells. And within MALT, we find copious amounts of lymphocytes and antigen-presenting cells. And the strategy here is that without a capsule and without any real architecture, we just have these clusters of lymphocytes and APCs hanging out, sampling whatever is being dragged against them. So in whichever region of the mucous membrane the pathogen moves through, then we have the opportunity of bringing antigens of that pathogen into contact with both lymphocytes and APCs. Now, there are aggregated lymphoid follicles, so clusters of these, and specifically, we call these Peyer's patches, named for a 17th century Swiss anatomist, Johann Peyer. These Peyer's patches we call GALT, and that's for gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And this GALT is in high concentration throughout the ileum. And any food materials that are consumed and digested, and as part of the chyme, as it moves through the small intestine, it rubs up against these Peyer's patches, and they are able to generate an immune response, and any of the B cells can be activated into plasma cells and start secreting IgA antibodies. Now, more proximal to these Peyer's patches, meaning earlier in the gut tube, we have Waldeyer's ring, or the pharyngeal ring of tonsils. Waldeyer was a 19th into the 20th century German anatomist who first discovered these bits of tissue. Interestingly enough, Waldeyer actually named neurons and named chromosomes as well. So the guy had some depth to him. But let's talk specifically about this ring of tonsils. So surrounding your pharynx or your throat are these mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues. And within this ring, we have things like the pharyngeal tonsil, also known as the adenoid, the palatine tonsils, or the tonsils. We can see them here laterally in the fauces of the pharynx, and the lingual tonsil at the root of the tongue. So this ring of tonsils kind of is 365 all the way around your throat, and it's found in both the nasopharynx and the oropharynx. And so as materials traverse the pharynx, they encounter all of these tonsils, and we have the opportunity of generating or activating immune responses. So creating plasma cells and the early production of IgA for any pathogens that we are consuming as well along the way, which is very nice. Now, sometimes these tonsils may become infected, and you've probably heard of, or perhaps have even experienced, tonsillitis. That itis is an inflammation. So tonsillitis, inflammation of the tonsils, specifically it's the palatine tonsils that become inflamed. So we can see one there, we can see one there, there's our tongue, there's the uvula, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot of space for other materials to move through. Maybe enough to breathe uncomfortably, but eating or drinking, anything is going to really bump into these palatine tonsils and cause you pain. Tonsillitis has a number of different etiologies. Generally, it's either viral or bacterial. If it's viral, there's not a whole lot that can be done, just supportive therapy, time, eating cool things, ice cream. If it's bacterial, typically it would be a group A streptococcus infection, and for bacterial, antibiotics may be indicated as a treatment. If there is recurrent tonsillitis, and this is posing a problem for the individual breathing, typically in children, a physician may recommend a tonsillectomy. So this is typically done by an ENT surgeon or an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. Another major secondary lymphatic organ is that of the spleen. The spleen is found in the left hypochondriac region, or the left upper quadrant of the abdominal pelvic cavity, and it is the body's single largest mass of lymphoid tissue. Now here we can see the spleen tucked up against the diaphragm. We can see it just in the flexure, or the splenic flexure of the large intestine, so where the transverse colon becomes the descending colon. And there are two regions of the spleen. We call them pulps. There is a white pulp and a red pulp. The white pulp of the spleen typically surrounds any of the arterial supply of the spleen. And this is where we have lymphocyte action. So this is where immune responses are modulated. The red pulp is everything that surrounds the white pulp. And the red pulp is more involved with the filtering of red blood cells, the sequestration of platelets, as well, partially, as hemopoiesis, or usually the expansion of lymphocytes through mitosis, not as original stem cells. So lymphadenopathy is the enlargement of lymph nodes. This is a very common condition. It also can be very non-specific. So it's an indication that there are immune responses occurring within the body. This can be generalized, systemic over the entire body, or it may be localized to a particular region, such as the neck or near the groin. Lymphadenitis is when the lymph nodes become inflamed, and this is the most common type of lymphadenopathy. Lymphadenopathies may also be indicative of a malignancy or a cancer. Typically, with a malignancy, a lymph node is enlarged, not at all painless, and it's what we say firm and fixed. So when you palpate a lymph node, typically it can be quite squishy and it can kind of roll under the skin of where you're palpating it. But a firm and fixed lymph node feels like a rock almost, a very solid mass that can't be moved around. And so this might be indicative of a lymphoma. This may be indicative of a metastasis. So there could be a carcinoma which has traveled from a primary tumor and is spreading throughout the lymphatic system from node to node. There's also something called lymphangitis. And with lymphangitis, the lymph vessels themselves may become inflamed. And this generally appears as kind of like a red or erythematous streaking underneath the skin. Now, I mentioned metastasis. Metastasis is the spread of a disease, and typically we refer to metastasis as the spread of a malignant disease such as cancer. There are a few different routes of metastasis. So transcelomic is when malignancies may move across the surface of a serous membrane. So either in the abdominal pelvic cavity or the thoracic cavity. There's also hematogenous metastasis, hemato of the blood. So this is where metastasis goes through the bloodstream. This is very common for types of cancers called sarcoma, which are derivatives of mesenchyme, as well as specifically renal carcinomas. Hematogenous metastasis is typically also venous, so it follows the pattern of venous drainage. So understanding the differential tributaries of veins can be very helpful for following this spread. Metastasis may also be lymphogenous, meaning it's following the lymphatic system. This is typically the case for carcinomas, which are derivatives of epithelial tissues. And generally the hallmark here is that the lymph node is firm and fixed, and it's also unilateral. So it's just on one side of the body, not on both sides of the body. So generally that fit test of palpating something on one side and it feels a little weird or suspicious, and then you palpate it on the other side and you're thinking, well, as a bilaterally symmetrical organism, things are okay. Whereas that unilateral red flag tends to be a little more concerning for people and their physicians. So let's test your knowledge. Immune responses typically occur in which part of the parenchyma of the spleen? Is it the gastric impression? That's where the stomach is. Nope. Is it the hilum of the spleen? That's where the blood vessels are received. Nope. Is it the red pulp? Nope. That's where we sequester platelets and filter red blood cells. Is it the renal impression where the left kidney sits? Nope, that's not it. Is it the white pulp? Yes, absolutely. That white pulp that surrounds the arterial supply of the spleen is what hosts the immune responses. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video. Take care.